Late morning on East Nichols Avenue in South Sacramento felt ordinary at first, until several gunshots broke the rhythm of the block and forced people to pause without fully understanding what had just happened. Residents stepped outside cautiously, scanning the street without moving too close, because even curiosity carried risk in a neighborhood where being seen could matter later. A car sat unevenly near the curb, and inside it, a man leaned motionless, his condition already beyond help, before anyone could intervene in any meaningful way. When deputies arrived within minutes, there was no active pursuit, no visible suspect, and no immediate explanation, only a scene that had already reached its conclusion. What unsettled people most was not just the violence itself, but how quickly it followed something that had taken place the previous night. As word spread through Oak Park and surrounding blocks, people started connecting names, and that was when Alonzo Walsh came up, though most around there knew him as Zilla Zoe from the Zilla clique tied to Oak Park Bloods. The timeline didn't sit right with anyone paying attention, since less than a day earlier, he had been seen in a diss video linked to Mozzy, where real names were being said without filters. While deputies treated the scene like another gang-related shooting, the streets moved faster, passing details through texts, calls, and conversations that never made it into official reports. Nobody stepped forward publicly, which kept investigators without leads, though that silence felt less like ignorance and more like people protecting themselves from what might follow. Within hours, different versions started floating around, with some saying retaliation came quickly from rival sets, while others hinted at something deeper tied to moves he made before that video even dropped. At the same time, reports came in about other shootings hitting nearby areas within that same window, which made the situation feel less isolated and more like something already in motion. That pattern raised a bigger question that people couldn't ignore, since timing like that rarely happens by coincidence, especially when names and faces get exposed publicly. To really understand how it reached that point that fast, you have to step away from the moment itself and look at where Zilla Zoe actually came from. Oak Park sits just a couple of miles from downtown Sacramento, since the neighborhood developed along a completely different path over the decades. Back in the early 1900s, it started as a working-class suburb with steady families, local businesses, and a structure that looked stable on the surface for years. That changed as policies in the mid-'80s and earlier decades shaped housing access, where redlining practices quietly determined who could secure loans, leaving Black families concentrated in areas like Oak Park without investment. As time passed, freeway construction in the 1960s cut through surrounding sections, breaking up communities while reducing business flow and limiting how people moved through the area daily. With fewer resources coming in, property values dropped, businesses shut down, and the environment shifted into something tighter, where survival started to outweigh long-term planning for most residents. When the crack era hit during the 1980s, it didn't introduce struggle into Oak Park. It turned existing hardship into an active street economy that moved fast and brought new risks with it. Groups that had once been loose circles became structured organizations, where identity, protection, and control all started linking together more seriously. That's where the Oak Park Bloods formed with a defined presence, building subsets across different blocks, including one known as the Zilla clique operating in the southern part of the neighborhood. Once that structure settled in, it started shaping the people inside it, including a young Alonzo Walsh growing up right in the middle of everything. Alonzo Walsh grew up inside Oak Park during a period when the neighborhood already had its rules set, which meant learning early how to move, who to trust, and when to stay quiet. Since no formal records tell his story from childhood, most of what people know about him comes from how he carried himself on those blocks and how others described his presence. As he got older, through the late 1990s and early 2000s, the expectations around him became clearer, since young men in that area were judged by how they handled pressure and how reliable they were when situations turned serious. That environment pushed him toward adapting quickly, since hesitation could cost more than just reputation when conflicts between sets stayed active across different parts of Sacramento. By his teenage years, he had already absorbed the local code, which meant understanding respect, retaliation, and loyalty without anyone needing to explain it directly in words. Around that time, he made the transition that people on those streets call jumping off the porch, which meant stepping into active participation rather than just being around it. That move tied him directly to the Zilla clique, a subset of the Oak Park Bloods operating in the southern region, where identity was built through actions rather than talk. Once he became part of that group, his name started forming from both his given identity and the clique he represented, which is how Alonzo turned into Zilla Zoe in everyday conversations. From there, his reputation didn't come from loud claims or public displays. It came from showing up consistently in situations where others might hesitate, which made people around him take note over time. Those who knew him described him as active, which in that context meant he was involved in real situations that carry risk, while also being dependable when others needed support. Instead of chasing attention, he built recognition through presence, which gave him a steady position within his circle without needing outside validation. His connections stayed tight within Oak Park, where relationships formed through shared experiences, shared risks, and the understanding that everyone involved relied on each other to move correctly. As those relationships deepened, one connection in particular stood out more than the rest, since it would later shape how his story unfolded beyond just the streets. Timothy Patterson, who would later become known as Mozzy, grew up in the same Oak Park environment, which meant his early experiences overlapped heavily with people like Zilla Zoe even before either of them gained recognition. Although their family situations had differences, with Mozzy being raised largely by his grandmother while dealing with absent parents, the streets around them created similar pressures that shaped how both of them moved. From a young age, Mozzy was already connected to the neighborhood through relatives and older figures, which pulled him into the same network where identity was tied to where you stood and who you stood with. While that environment pushed many towards street activity, Mozzy also had another outlet developing at the same time, since he started rapping around age 12. As he moved into his teenage years and early adulthood, he balanced both paths, taking small jobs like delivering newspapers and working at a sandwich shop while still staying connected to what was happening around Oak Park. That balance didn't last long, since between 2005 and 2008, he faced multiple arrests tied to possession charges, which reflected how difficult it was to separate from the environment completely. By 2010, he shifted his focus more seriously into music, adopting the name Mozzy and beginning to release projects that slowly built attention within Sacramento. During that same period, his relationship with Zilla Zoe remained steady, since both of them shared history, location, and the same network of people who were active in the streets. While Mozzy started leaning further into music as a long-term path, Zilla Zoe stayed deeper in the street side of that world, though their connection never broke, since they still moved within the same circle and faced the same external pressures. That dynamic created a situation where one person was gaining visibility through music, while the other maintained his role through direct involvement in neighborhood activity. Both identities stayed tied to Oak Park, which meant any conflict involving that area affected them directly, regardless of which path each one leaned toward at the time. As tensions in Sacramento continued to build between different groups, those connections became more important, since loyalty often determined how people responded when situations escalated. It was during this period that the conflict outside their immediate circle started gaining momentum, setting the stage for events that would soon pull both of their names into something much bigger. By the time Mozzy started putting his name out through music, the conflict shaping Oak Park had already been running for years, and it involved more than just local disagreements or short-term disputes. On the other side of that tension stood a group tied to the Stars movement, with CML Lavish D becoming the most visible face representing that side publicly. Although many people later linked the situation to rap beef, the truth is the hostility between Oak Park Bloods and crews connected to Mac Road had been active since at least 2006, which meant multiple incidents had already taken place long before any camera started rolling. Those early clashes built a foundation where both sides understood each other as real threats, not just names to mention casually, and that understanding shaped how every interaction played out going forward. As years passed, the tension grew through repeated encounters with shootings, robberies, and retaliations happening in cycles that rarely made it into mainstream coverage, though people living in Sacramento knew exactly what was going on. Each side built its own alliances, which expanded the conflict beyond just two groups, turning it into a network of connected crews that could step in whenever situations escalated. Within that environment, reputation mattered heavily, since any sign of weakness could invite pressure from multiple directions at once, while any act of disrespect demanded a response to maintain standing. By the early 2000s, both Oak Park and Stars had established identities that were recognized across Sacramento, which meant any confrontation between them carried weight beyond a single incident. When music entered the picture, it didn't create the conflict. It gave it a louder voice, since artists from both sides started translating real street tensions into lyrics that reached wider audiences. Mozzy, coming from Oak Park, used his records to speak directly about what was happening around him, while Lavish D did the same from his perspective, which turned private disputes into public statements. Unlike mainstream rap, where references might stay vague, these tracks included real names, real neighborhoods, and real situations, which meant listeners from those areas understood exactly who was being targeted. That level of directness changed the stakes, since once a name appeared in a song, it became part of the record permanently, something rivals could replay, analyze, and respond to without limits. The internet played a major role in pushing everything further, since platforms like YouTube allowed those videos to circulate quickly, reaching not just local viewers, but people across different cities who followed street music closely. As those videos gained traction, they didn't just build fan bases, they exposed affiliations, faces, and locations to anyone watching, which increased the risk for everyone involved. That visibility meant that every appearance carried consequences, since being seen next to certain people or in certain places could be interpreted as a statement, whether intended or not. Within that environment, disrespect wasn't just taken as words. It was treated as a real-world challenge that required a response, especially when it came from someone connected to an opposing side. Each track, each video, and each mention added pressure, building toward a point where something bigger was bound to happen. By early 2013, that pressure had reached a level where both sides were already watching closely, waiting for the next move that might shift things further. It was during that moment that one specific song came into play, a release that would push everything into a different direction almost immediately. On April 9th, 2013, Mozzy uploaded a track titled "The Truth" to YouTube, and from the moment it went live, it carried a tone that left no room for interpretation about what it was meant to do. Instead of using indirect references or coded language, the song addressed specific individuals by name, including CML Lavish D and others connected to the opposing side, which made it clear that this was not just music for entertainment. Every line connected back to real situations happening in Sacramento. That level of detail turned the track into more than just a diss, since it documented a position within an ongoing dispute that both sides understood clearly. The video itself added another layer, since it didn't just rely on lyrics to send its message. It showed faces, movements, and affiliations directly on screen. People standing alongside Mozzy became part of that message, whether they spoke or not, since their presence confirmed their alignment publicly. Among those individuals was Zilla Zoe, who appeared in the video even though Mozzy had reportedly advised him not to take part due to the seriousness of what was being said. Despite that warning, Zilla Zoe chose to be there, which reflected how loyalty and identity worked within that environment, where stepping back could be seen as distancing yourself from the situation. That decision tied his face directly to the content of the song, which meant anyone watching could associate him with everything being said. Within hours, the video started circulating across different platforms, gaining attention from both supporters and rivals who were already familiar with the names involved. Even though YouTube removed the video within about 24 hours due to its content, the impact had already spread. Once the video reached the streets, reactions started forming almost immediately, since those mentioned in the track or connected to the situation had already seen enough to understand what it represented. Conversations shifted quickly, moving from online discussions to real-world responses, where individuals started preparing for possible retaliation or confrontation. That overnight period became critical, since the tension that had been building for years suddenly had a new focal point that everyone could point to directly. Each hour that passed added pressure as people waited to see how the other side would respond, knowing that silence rarely lasted long in situations like that. By the time night turned into morning, the atmosphere around Sacramento felt different, even if nothing had happened publicly yet, since the expectation of action hung over the situation. People connected to both sides moved carefully, aware that something could happen at any moment, especially with names and faces now circulating more widely than before. What made it more intense was how quickly everything had unfolded, since less than a day earlier, the video had just been another upload, yet now it carried real consequences. As the hours passed into the next day, that tension didn't fade. It built towards something that nobody could fully predict, though many expected some kind of response. That response came sooner than most imagined, since the next morning would bring everything back to that moment on East Nichols Avenue. By late morning on April 10th, 2013, deputies responded to reports of gunfire along the 4,200 block of East Nichols Avenue, where residents had already stepped outside trying to understand what had just happened. When officers arrived, they found Alonzo Walsh, known across Oak Park as Zilla Zoe, suffering from a gunshot wound while positioned in or near a vehicle with no active scene left to secure. Initial details from the Sacramento County Sheriff's Department indicated he had been shot while inside a car, though it remained unclear how many people were present during the incident or how the approach happened. Witnesses nearby did not provide clear descriptions of any suspects, and no immediate leads surfaced, despite the shooting taking place in daylight within a residential area. That lack of cooperation wasn't unusual for Oak Park, since people understood that speaking openly could bring attention they didn't want attached to their name. Deputies processed the scene, collected shell casings, and documented the position of the vehicle, though nothing pointed clearly toward a specific individual or group at that moment. Within hours, officials classified the killing as gang-related, which placed it within a broader pattern already recognized by law enforcement across Sacramento. Even with that classification, the investigation did not produce public arrests, which left the case open while the streets continued forming their own conclusions. Since Zilla Zoe had appeared in Mozzy's The Truth video less than a day earlier, which made the connection difficult for people to ignore, even without official confirmation. While investigators focused on known rivalries, The streets processed the situation faster, linking the video release to the shooting in real time through conversations that moved quicker than any formal report. That same day, additional shootings were reported in nearby areas, which reinforced the idea that the conflict had escalated beyond a single incident and into a wider response. Fear settled into the neighborhood quickly, though it didn't show through panic or visible reaction, since people adjusted by staying quiet, keeping distance, and avoiding unnecessary movement. Conversations shifted indoors or stayed within trusted circles, where details were shared carefully without drawing attention. For those who knew Zilla Zoe personally, the loss hit close, especially considering he was only 25 years old. His death carried weight beyond the streets, though that impact rarely appeared publicly, since families in those situations often processed grief away from outside attention. Even with that loss, the story didn't stop at the shooting itself, since what followed would stretch across months and years, pulling more people into the same cycle that had already taken him. After the shooting, the official narrative from law enforcement stayed consistent, framing Zilla Zoe's death as part of an ongoing gang rivalry tied to conflicts between Oak Park Bloods and opposing groups connected to the STARS movement. That explanation aligned with the broader pattern of violence in Sacramento at the time, where retaliation often followed public acts of disrespect, especially when those acts included direct naming in music or visible association in videos. From that perspective, appearing in The Truth placed Zilla Zoe in a position where retaliation became more likely, since his presence confirmed alignment with Mozzy during a moment of heightened tension. While that narrative made sense on the surface, it didn't fully explain the speed or specific circumstances surrounding the shooting, which left room for other interpretations to develop. Among those alternative explanations, one theory circulated heavily within street conversations, suggesting that the killing might have been tied to a robbery, often referred to as a lick, which Zilla Zoe had allegedly been involved in prior to the video release. According to that version, the situation could have involved betrayal from someone within or close to his own circle. That idea didn't come from official sources, yet it gained traction through word of mouth, where details often move without documentation, but still influence how events are understood locally. The lack of arrests or confirmed suspects allowed that theory to exist alongside the official explanation without being disproven or validated publicly. Mozzy himself addressed these possibilities during later interviews, where he acknowledged that multiple factors could have contributed to what happened, rather than pointing to a single cause. He mentioned that Zilla Zoe had been involved in different situations before the video, which meant the risk was already present regardless of the track's release. At the same time, he also recognized that the timing between the video and the shooting made it difficult to separate the two completely, since appearing publicly in that context increased visibility. What becomes clear when looking at both perspectives is that the video may not have created the danger itself, though it likely intensified it by bringing attention to someone already connected to ongoing conflicts. In that sense, the release of The Truth acted more like an accelerator, pushing an existing situation toward a faster outcome rather than starting it from nothing. Without confirmed evidence pointing to one specific motive, the exact cause remains unresolved, leaving both explanations standing without closure. As time moved forward, what mattered more was not which theory proved correct, but how the consequences continued unfolding beyond that single event. After April 10, 2013, the situation in Sacramento did not slow down. Instead, it carried forward into a stretch where shootings continued across different neighborhoods tied to the same conflict. Reports from that period show multiple incidents happening within short time frames, where individuals connected to Oak Park and opposing crews became targets in ongoing retaliation cycles. Each event added pressure, which meant people involved moved differently, staying alert while also preparing for the next situation that could come at any moment. What made it more intense was how these incidents were no longer isolated, since they connected back to the same network of disputes that had been building for years. As the months progressed, music continued playing a role in shaping how the conflict developed, since new tracks started coming out that referenced ongoing tensions without stepping away from direct mentions. Mozzy, who had already gained attention from The Truth, followed up with additional releases that maintained the same tone, which kept his name tied to the situation both locally and beyond Sacramento. One of those tracks, I'm Just Being Honest, released in early 2014, pushed things further, since it reached a wider audience while still carrying the same direct approach. That visibility meant more people were paying attention, though it also increased pressure from the opposing side, where responses were expected rather than avoided. The conflict moved into public spaces in ways that drew more attention, especially after an incident at Arden Fair Mall on March 15, 2014. An associate connected to Mozzy was attacked by Lavish D and others. That situation was recorded and later uploaded online, which turned a physical confrontation into a widely shared event that people could replay repeatedly. Within days of that incident, Sacramento police recorded 8 shootings involving 11 victims between March 15th and March 22nd, with at least 3 of those incidents directly linked to the mall assault. Those numbers reflected how quickly violence could escalate once public actions tied back into existing disputes, especially when both sides were already active. Law enforcement began increasing its presence, focusing on individuals connected to these incidents, which led to surveillance, traffic stops, and arrests aimed at slowing down the situation. On March 21st, 2014, Mozzy was stopped in a vehicle where officers found codeine, a loaded Glock handgun, and additional ammunition, which resulted in charges that eventually led to his incarceration. That arrest placed him inside San Quentin State Prison, marking a shift where his career and legal situation became closely tied together moving forward. At the same time, Lavish D faced his own legal consequences, receiving a 6-year sentence related to the Arden Mall incident, along with prior charges that increased the severity of his case. Even with those arrests, the broader conflict did not disappear, since the network of individuals involved extended beyond a single person or event, allowing the situation to continue through different participants. Violence remained present across Sacramento, with repeated shootings showing how deeply rooted the tension had become over time. Meanwhile, Mozzy's career kept developing, since after serving time, he returned to music and released projects that gained national attention, including albums that placed him among recognized names in West Coast rap. Years later, law enforcement carried out a larger operation targeting the Oak Park Bloods, with multiple arrests announced in November 2021 as part of a coordinated takedown involving state and local agencies. That operation addressed a range of crimes linked to the same network that had been active during the time of Zilla Zoe's death, though it did not resolve his specific case. For those connected to Oak Park, the crackdown represented a delayed response to issues that had been present for decades, where enforcement followed after damage had already taken place. As time moved forward, what remained was not just the memory of specific events, but the recognition that the cycle had extended far beyond one moment. Zilla Zoe did not become widely known outside Sacramento, though within Oak Park, his name stayed connected to the people and events that defined that period. His story continues through Mozzy's music and through those who remember him directly, where his role reflects a larger system shaped by environment, choices, and timing. What happened to him remains unresolved in terms of exact cause, though its impact still carries forward. In the end, his story shows how cycles continue beyond individuals, where one event leads into another without a clear stopping point.